Good afternoon, everybody. We will give everyone just a few more moments to jump in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started momentarily. Thank you. All right, as people are jumping in, good afternoon. My name is Aaron Mahl, Executive Vice President for Business Development here at iTValuations. Grateful to have an opportunity today to talk through another one of our webinars in our Value Driver series, specifically around growth and marketing drivers of value. Joined today by Robin Robbins from TMT and Greg Northrop from our iTValuations team. Thanks so much to both of you for making time today. For those of you who have been on our webinar series before, you know we like to have a little bit of fun with our guests and do a little bit of trivia. And what we typically do is ask a trivia question about our guest, and then the first person to put the correct answer into the chat will win an Amazon gift card at the end of the webinar. You got to stick around, though, to find out if you win. Must be present to win, as they say. So I've been trying to pin down Robin on a question, and that question is, which of the following 5 celebrity interviews was Robin's most memorable? And this is actually multiple choice. Sometimes, most of the time it's just an open-ended question. You've got to figure it out as the audience, but we're actually, there's already a guest for Gene Simmons. He's not even on the list. And so, but there are 5 options, and one of these memorable. 5 is true, actually. And here's the reality. I don't know which one it is. She hasn't told me yet. I'm going to stick around the webinar to the very end because I don't even know. And so I can't wait to find out. So the first one to put, you get one guess only. So the first one you put in is the one that counts. And so if you're the first person, you'll win that Amazon gift card for $25. So stick around. A couple housekeeping items before we launch into our topic for today. A couple upcoming webinars over the next month or so. In just a couple weeks, Greg will be back on with me to talk about transactions and taxes, understanding the impact of buying and selling IT firms and MSPs. So a great bit of content around transaction readiness, especially from a tax perspective. Then we're going to also revisit the Value Driver series, the next episode in this series, around how employment retention and satisfaction actually drives value for your company. And we have Ted White from Vertical Talent Solutions who will be joining us. And then the first part of what will be about a 6-part series called My Transaction Story, which is the Net Effect story. So Net Effect, based out of Las Vegas, transacted last year, and they'll talk about their journey through the transaction piece, and excited to hear their story, just an organic and authentic story of how they went through that transaction process. So that's a little bit about what's coming up around the corner. All right, enough housekeeping, enough of me talking. Let's get to our guests. Great to have Greg back on, and Robin as well. Greg, why don't you start with just a brief introduction of yourself, your personal background, and then we'll let Robin go after you.
Yeah, Greg Northrop, been on the Value series a couple of times, but my background here at iTValuations, Vice President of Tax and Valuations, so do most of the valuations here as part of our VAST program and one-time valuations, and then also Managing Partner of IT Tax Advisors, so oversee tax compliance consulting advisory services for IT service companies. And so really worked with Reed to help put together the 24 drivers of value, of which we're going to be talking to a few of them today. So thanks for joining. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Great. Robin, you may need no introduction, but we still like to have one if possible.
Well, yeah, so my name is Robin Robbins. So nice they named me twice. Everyone's like, is that a real name? And it's like, yes, it's a real name. So I started my marketing consulting business back in 2001. And my main, I didn't start my business with this grandiose vision of creating a multi-million-dollar marketing firm for MSPs. I was literally trying to figure out how to pay the rent, but was looking for a particular niche or niche, depending on who's listening, where you're from, and to call home. And I found MSPs, more VARs at the time, and instantly, I'll say fell in love. In other words, it was a market of individuals that were very kindred spirits. I was able to get some great results early on for them for some of those. And so since 2001, I've worked exclusively with MSPs, VARs, IT service companies to help them not only generate more sales, but get higher paying, higher value customers. And I would even say build their business as something that is worth selling, which is what you guys help MSPs with. Is to get the organic growth, the revenue, the profitability, the right fit customers so they can obtain the goals that they want that you guys are teaching them to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great introduction. We're excited to jump into the topic today because I think sometimes when people think of valuations, a question that Greg and I often get, and I think really everyone at the company gets is, well, what's the multiple? What's the multiple? As if you just slap a multiple onto EBITDA and the multiple is what drives the value. And we talk all the time about how multiples are actually derived from other data points. They're not just slapped on and applied. And so when we look at evaluating our clients, we do a couple hundred valuations a year. We're examining a lot of different factors, 24 to be specific. And there's a lot of things related to finance, right? Some accounting practices, but even things like employee satisfaction, transaction readiness. A lot of these factors go into the overall valuation of the company. But the ones in orange are really marketing related. And so oftentimes individuals or maybe business owners can focus on one or two or maybe even a dozen of these factors, but really neglect others. And they do so in essence at their own peril because they're missing out on opportunities to drive value. So we wanted to launch into each one of these values. And Greg, I'll start with you. We're going to talk first about the go-to-market strategy. What are you seeing in this driver? And what does it look like for those clients who maybe are scoring high and maybe those who are scoring a little bit lower?
Yeah, great introduction, Aaron. I mean, on the 24 drivers of value, what we really do is we break down 16, I'll call them direct drivers of value that are actually going into the valuation calculation. And then we have 8 more marketability characteristics of value where they're really like, how do you differentiate yourself from another MSP that's also at the same revenue size, same profitability in the same geographic region, right? Because no two businesses are exactly alike. And so when we're looking at some of those 8 different factors, go-to-market strategy is one of them, where we're really looking at, okay, what sets you apart and how you actually approach the marketplace. Do you actually have a strategy in place in how you bring on new customers? Do you have a verticalization approach? Do you kind of take any and everything, or are you a lot more targeted into what customers you bring on? And are you actually willing to potentially even say no to certain customers coming on because you want to preserve the type of clientele that you're trying to bring in, which then ultimately preserves your people, preserves your profitability, and helps you actually grow in the way in which you want to grow. And so that's where when we're looking at this strategy, it goes hand in hand with so many other characteristics of growth. But growing for growing's sake is not necessarily a good thing. It's really understanding what is that strategy behind your growth and your marketing to do such that we're really focusing on with this risk factor.
Yeah, Robin, most MSPs likely said they have a go-to-market plan, right? And I've heard you say before that in some cases it's just random acts of marketing. So what does a real go-to-market strategy look like? And what are some of the common lies that MSPs tell themselves about having one?
Well, yeah, like you said, most marketing plans are just that, random acts of marketing. They hire somebody and they say, okay, well, they start thinking very tactically. Okay, well, we need a website. And we probably should be doing something on social media. And maybe we should get some business cards printed up. And maybe we need some brochures. And in other words, it's just this, like I said, random acts of things that they're doing that they think somehow is going to get them a customer. And it doesn't, right? They just end up spending money and getting more frustrated. And what I typically see more often than that, like random acts of marketing, is really the second of evolution to where most of them start, which is they start with the vulture marketing plan, which is they sit on a perch all day and they wait for something to just die right in front of them so they can go leap on the carcass and peck at the meat with the other vultures. In other words, like they just wait for that referral to come in. And because they don't hunt, they have to be happy with whatever scraps are left over, whatever dies in front of them, because vultures don't hunt. So they got to eat whatever dies. And so that's like really what most of them do. There's not even, I wish I could get them to random acts because that at least they would be doing something. But then there's vulture marketing, and then they do the random acts. And then hopefully where they're going to get is to where they have a real strategic plan to how are we going to acquire and monetize customers. So let me first of all explain that when people think about growing their business, they think of sales and marketing as two different functions. They treat them as two different functions. They're not strategic. They're sort of like bolted on. And that's a huge mistake, right? So number one, because when you want to grow your company, there's three areas to grow. All right. So when we're talking about like a sales and marketing, growing revenue, growing profitability, and it's what we call our ACE framework, ACE. And the A stands for attract. So one way you could grow your business is you can do a lot of outbound marketing. You could be doing, whether it's search engine optimization, pay-per-click digital marketing ads, or it's trade shows and referral campaigns, or it's outbound prospecting with an SDR, a sales development rep, or a sales team. So you have this attraction component where you have to drive more leads inbound, right? And you want to have systems and processes, you want to have strategy, and you definitely want to have metrics around that, right? But then a lot of people forget there's two other components to this. So once you're generating leads, the C in the ACE framework is convert. Most MSPs, when they start doing marketing, they're grossly unprepared to handle inbound leads. So they don't have a CRM in place where they can capture and track leads and actually follow up appropriately. That's why I have MSPs coming to me, been in business for 30, 40 years, and they don't even have a list. It's because they're not tracking inbound leads. They're not putting them into a CRM. They're not doing drip marketing. They have no real sales process. So that's all part of convert. It's being able to capture and track leads, just like a ticketing system. Like if you think about an MSP, I always give them this analogy. If you're trying to run an MSP and you have inbound tickets coming in, what if you didn't have a PSA tool or an RMM tool or these tools in order to organize, troubleshoot, and clear track tickets? You wouldn't be able to run a profitable MSP. Well, it's the same thing with marketing. You need a ticketing system, which is your CRM marketing automation platform. You need a process for capturing and making sure none of those leads get left behind, meaning you got to answer your phone, you got to email, online web forms, social media, leads come in, all these. You have to have a way to capture them, track them, put them into a CRM, and the sales process begins of follow up and trying to get that appointment. Some people move to customers, some don't. Most don't. And so building that list and nurturing that list is all part of the C, or the convert. And then you get into expand. And this is another area where a lot of MSPs overlook, is once you convert them to a customer, marketing doesn't stop. Marketing and sales don't stop. There's a different process begins. Because expanding the value of a customer is about getting them to spend more money with you, or in cross-sell and upsells. It is about getting them to refer people to you, because every customer can be an asset. It is about using them as a case study to go and acquire new customers. That's all part of expand. And what's interesting is if you get a 10% increase in each of these areas, you have a 10% increase in new leads coming in, you have a 10% higher conversion rate of the leads that actually end up buying, and then the expansion, you make every customer worth 10% more by raising prices or converting more to customers and doing your QBRs and getting them to refer. It's not a 10% increase. It's actually like a 51% increase. So it's exponential. So when we're talking about go to market, it is not just put up a website, because that's very tactical, or do social media. It is the strategic process of thinking through systems and process with goals and real metrics, and a team of people who are your money team, who are going to make this process and this function work and professionalize your go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, I think, I was going to ask you, is before you start answering the question, what's the difference between activity and go-to-market and a strategy? You outlined it. It's that ACE piece, right? And that's so valuable. Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, if I may, let me just interject. So if you really look at a marketing plan, people say a marketing plan. And when you say marketing plan, what most people think is like it's a list, it's a budget and a calendar, right? Like, okay, we're going to spend this much and here's a calendar of stuff we're going to do. But there's like 4 component parts. And the first component is the part most people never get right, which is the strategy. And strategy is about who is your customer? Who are we trying to dominate, get brand awareness around? Like, who is that customer? You have to that's like square one. You got to know that. And most MSPs still can't articulate that.
Mm.
Like, I was just on the phone with an MSP that's about 50 million in revenue, and the conversation was all about who's your customer, and they're still struggling with this. I'm like, guys, come on. So you got to, like, your strategy, there's, that's who's your customer. That is, what is your value proposition? How are you going to differentiate? Your strategy is your customer acquisition cost. What can you afford to get a lead, to get a customer? You need to have all of that baked into strategy. Also, are you going to grow by franchise? Are you going to grow by M&A, both, organic? That's all part of strategy. The second part of a marketing plan are your assets. And assets are things like your website could be an asset. Your list is the single biggest asset you could ever own in an MSP. Most people don't even think about their list that way. But an asset could be, it's usually marketing pieces or campaigns that deliver they touch all of your marketing. Like, for example, one of the things we have is MSP Success Magazine. It's a media company, but that is an asset for me, even though it's not a huge revenue generator, because the magazine, I mean, we sell ads, but we basically want to break even on it, right? Because it's not about making money with the magazine. It is about PR. It's about positioning. It is about getting interviews like this, right? So that is an asset to me. A unique selling proposition could be an asset to you. A book, if you've published a book, if you have celebrity branding, those are all assets. So you have your strategy, you have your assets, you have your calendar, and that is more of the media campaigns. Like, what campaigns are we going to run around here? And then you've got your you've got your campaigns, which are like the calendars made up of these specific campaigns that you're going to be running. Hopefully, we call marketing oil wells. I don't believe in one and done. I believe in repeatable systems. So you have a trade show marketing system. You have a referral marketing system. You have a prospecting sales, outbound prospecting system. And so again, when most people think about marketing, again, random acts, but there's really those four component parts, and you need all four in order to get the maximum return that you want.
Yeah, that's great. Greg, the next factor is market prominence.
Mm-hmm.
And my slide's not moving forward. There it is. Okay. Talk about this factor and how the valuation can be influenced by this specific factor.
Yeah, I mean, Robin, I love that analogy of ACE, and it really kind of plays into all these different factors that we're talking about, because go-to-market strategy really is the who do you want to attract. Market prominence is really the how well are you attracting them? How well are they actually aware of the fact that you're trying to attract them? Do they know that you exist? Do they know that you're a player in the space? Do they know that you're an option of someone who can actually service them in the way that they have their needs? Because I think sometimes there's a lot of times when you're doing marketing, you're not always conveying what you can do and who you want to try and help to, again, piggybacking on what Robin, you're saying. And this market prominence piece is then trying to go that layer deeper and saying, well, how well is the market actually aware of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to offer, how you're able to trying to help this community? Because if all of a sudden you're really trying to play big in the dental space, and you talk to a lot of dental practices in the area in which you're trying to market, and they have never heard of you, that's probably a bad sign. Right. So this is really trying to gain kind of that brand awareness within the marketplace. And ultimately, that really helps from a transaction standpoint, because if you were able to do that at your size MSP, well, then maybe you can bring something to that next iteration, that next company as you get acquired, that now all of a sudden can help lift that even further on a grander scale for that larger acquirer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in some ways, it feels like this is a lot about branding. So, Robin, talk about how MSPs utilize branding to truly drive market prominence and increase their valuation.
Well, most MSPs don't use branding. So,
Right.
brand is not the color of your logo, although it is, if that makes sense. It's not it is the imagery. But for most MSPs, where I have them start is not to just do branding for branding's sake, because companies like Nike or Coca-Cola or many of the people you'll see on like the Super Bowl ads, like, they're running brand ads. They're not running direct response ads. when a Super Bowl ad runs, they don't measure success in products sold, which breaks my heart, but it's the truth. They measure it in things like hashtags and shares and likes. Okay, so that's really more about branding. It's something entirely different. Most MSPs, you're way too small to be able to afford a pure branding budget. Okay, so where I have them actually start is in putting in place direct response marketing. So that's marketing that is targeted to a very specific customer with a good message via a media, this is 4M's, market, message, media, math, via a media that prospect will pay attention to and will talk to. And then the math is just like, well, what response rate should we get? What's customer acquisition cost? It's all the numbers around a campaign, right? And so what I have most MSPs doing is you got to get out there and do lead gen first. You got to start getting opportunities in your pipeline. You got to start having conversations with the market. And in doing so, branding is a byproduct. So if we do branding for branding's sake, branding doesn't necessarily always directly align with sales, okay? But when we're doing direct response marketing, meaning I'm doing lead generation specifically, branding becomes a byproduct because people become aware of you through the direct response marketing. So I know that sounds like a little silly, but does that make sense? I want to make sure, am I explaining this properly? Because
Yeah.
okay.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but here's what I would say about a brand. Again, it goes back to who is your customer, what's your value proposition, and then every touch point that customer sees should have a look and a feel to it that will make somebody familiar. I've heard people say all the time they can see a marketing campaign and they go, "That's a TMT campaign." It's not, it's just the way it is. They instantly know who it is. And so when you're trying to go and dominate a market, that's why, again, you have to know the who. Again, I just had a conversation with a larger MSP. These are sharp guys. These are not dumb guys by any stretch. And they had said, hey, we want to become the premier MSP nationwide. And then it kept going on. I said, wait a minute, stop. What does premier even mean? What does that mean? It's like a brochure word, right? What does it mean? How do you know when you are the premier, right? I said, let's talk about markets that you can dominate, because even though these are a pretty big MSP, there's a lot of businesses out there. And to say we want to be the best known MSP, these guys don't have the budget to get that done. It's just too big. You're trying to make a splash in the ocean. Right? You want to find puddles you can jump up and down in because you can make a bigger impact, right? So my advice to them is, even like as you grow, pick a couple vertical markets or client avatars, and you build that list and you find out who are the influencers and what are the trade shows and where are the lists. We build that. And then what we're doing is we are building this list of prospects, of people we want, and we are marketing it to it in every way, shape, or form. So we are doing, whether it's direct mail, email, phone calls, social media, trade shows, canvassing, meaning walking in their door, referrals, influencers, and that kind of, we know exactly this is the little pond we have chosen to carve out to dominate. And we are going to put all of our effort into building that list and talking to those people directly, instead of just these random acts again. Oh, let's do a billboard, let's do a radio ad, let's do pay-per-click, let's just do these things. I mean, that's what I did with the MSP industry. I guarantee you, I have the best list of MSPs in North America, because that's where we focus. I mean, we do have international, but that's really our focus. I have the best list, the cleanest, most succinct, detailed list in this industry, because a long time ago, 2001, I said, I want MSPs. I want MSPs in North America. And so it's made it a mission of, I want to get every single MSP in North America on my list with full contact information, name, email, phone, mailing address. I want to know who the decision maker is. I want to know their revenue size. And we've built that list and we continually update it and market it. That's why I have brand dominance, because I've not been random about this for 2 decades.
Yeah, it sounds like for sure a lack of focus can sabotage MSPs, right? Being too broad with the market,
100%.
not being specific with the messaging. What other ways do MSPs sabotage their authority without really even realizing it?
Well, I think it happens a lot. I think so. Marketing is the beginning of the sales process. This is something they don't teach salespeople. So I've been in sales my whole life. I am a salesperson. If my marketing skills are up here, my sales skills, I think my marketing skills are a little bit better than my sales skills, but I was always a top performing sales rep. So I know how to sell and I know how to do marketing. And marketing, I've learned, is the beginning of the sales process, because how a prospect is introduced to you matters of how that sale goes, right? And so most people, again, think marketing and sales are two separate departments. They typically don't like each other. The marketing team thinks the sales people are a bunch of lazy bastards who only, cherry pick the leads. And the marketing team's always sitting there going, well, we don't have leads and the leads are no good. It's the Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, or why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? Because if we were doing those things, we'd have more leads. It'd be easier for me to sell. So in most companies, the sales and marketing team are fighting. They're not in alignment, and they need to be in alignment, because if I'm a sales rep, how that prospect gets introduced to me, what they know about me and my company before I even walk in the door, establishes, am I a trusted authority on my topic, or am I just another IT sales guy? And that's so positioning and authority has to start all the way from the beginning again of when I go to your website, what do you specialize in? What makes you unique? Where are your client case studies? Where's the evidence or the proof that you're actually a trusted authority? Do you have any published materials, free reports, books that you've authored? Have you been on the news media? These things, like before the prospect even meets with you, the sense is, do they get the sense that they're meeting with a salesperson, or do they get the sense they're meeting with a trusted authority? And that is what marketing does initially. Now, it has to be carried all the way through the sales process, because you get a salesperson who walks in there with either commission breath, which a lot of these guys don't even have that. I wish they did, where they're just like trying to hard sell you something, or they're engineers. And so they go in there and they just start quoting bits and parts and software, and that's not selling either, right? So I think the way they're sabotaging their authority positioning is, first of all, you got to have a position to be an authority about it, right? I mean, so you got to be like, what do you specialize in? So authority marketing, authority and trust starts with being a specialist in a market, in solving a problem in something. So you have to have this decision that goes, again, we're going right back to the beginning of strategy of who's your customer, what's your value proposition, how are you going to differentiate? And then you do everything to become an authority on that. And your marketing is what does that for you, not you walking in front of a customer who's never heard of you before, and all you got is a business card, and now you got to sing and dance and tap dance to try and tell everybody how great you are, because the marketing should have done that for you to begin with.
Yeah. I think too, you mentioned earlier that conversion piece. I mean, I've always said conversion starts at the top of the funnel. It isn't that you work harder once they're a lead and you try to convert them then. It's by doing that work on the front end, you're going to drive a higher conversion rate down funnel. But yeah, that's great. Let's talk about the next growth factor. And I'll tell you what, PowerPoint is being a problem for me today. It's not advancing my slide. If only I had an MSP who could help me fix this, right? If there's any MSP owners on the call, I would love to have you reach out to me and let me know why I'm not able to click through the next slide. Growth potential. Greg, how does this differ from actual growth? I mean, growth is easy to measure, right? Year over year revenue, maybe EBITDA. How does this differ from actual growth, and what are the ramifications of scoring well here versus maybe not scoring well?
Well, I'm going to piggyback on Robin's ACE, because I love that acronym, and I think it's really pertinent to all these different topics we're covering. But this is really the C, the conversion for an MSP, where we're looking at what is that conversion rate, what is your ability to bring in targeted leads that then you can convert at a higher rate. Therefore, you have new logo growth, you have organic growth in your business, and you've actually built a funnel. To Aaron, the point you just mentioned, right? Like, you've built a funnel where you are very intentional of what's coming into the funnel. So therefore, there's a better outcome more often than not downstream through the funnel. And so that's actually dictating your growth potential, because there are plenty of companies out there that grow 10, 15, 20% year over year by accident. And not to say that happens to everyone, but like, it can happen just by referrals dropping in your lap. That vulture mindset of like, okay, I took on the 10 grand a month MRR customer. You're not going to say no to that. Or you took on the big $100,000 hardware refresh. You're not going to say no to that. That's going to help your growth. But is there a sustainable model in place that now when we look at your numbers from a value perspective, we're not looking at the top of the iceberg. We're only just seeing the bottom of the mountain of what trajectory you're on, because we can actually start to pinpoint, well, you've actually sustained success in this conversion. You've actually have a lot of track record here that now we can actually forecast that into the future. And that's going to give you a value uplift, because now your value trajectory is so much higher than your competition. And thus, ultimately, you're more valuable today.
Yeah, when you think about, we represent buyers and sellers, never at the same time. That's a really fast way to irritate a lot of people really quickly. But when we represent a seller, uh, if they're growing consistently year over year for 4 or 5 years in a row, that's a much easier go-to-market for that seller than it would be if there's been ups and downs and that lack of consistency. The reality, though, is everyone wants to grow, right? But not everyone's set up for it, right, Robin? And so, what are the non-negotiables the MSPs must have in place to actually scale and grow and not stall out?
Well, I think it starts with the mindset of the entrepreneur running the place, right? Because I've been doing this for over 20 years, and we figured out a long time ago how to get a customer in the door of an MSP. We figured out a long time ago how do you convert a customer, a lead to a sale. Like we know how to do that. That's not the problem anymore. So even though I can map this all out for somebody, but they still won't execute. Because you can give them the best plan in the world, but if somebody won't go actually implement it, it's worthless. It's the winning lottery ticket you never cash in, right? And so if they want to, they want to grow, but what stops them is this mindset. We call it, like, they have a tech mindset versus a real entrepreneur mindset. It's like a tech with helpers. So most MSPs, and I'm not making them out to be bad guys, because I started this way, but most MSPs, when they start their business, like I did, you're good at something. And so you start this business being a consultant, doing what you're good at. For me, it was marketing. I could teach people how to get leads, how to convert leads, and I started a business. That's what I did. I was a technician of marketing, let's say. And that was great. And that can get you customers. And that if you do a good job, it'll get you referrals. But to really scale and grow requires you to move beyond that employee. It's like an employee mindset, that tech with helpers, and really to start thinking like an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur looks at a business differently. An entrepreneur looks at a business and says, I need to build teams of people and systems and processes to scale this thing up, not just run it by the seat of my pants, not just have my fingers in every little thing that's going on, but build real leaders. And I think that's where an MSP truly will grow. And I'm saying this from experience too. So I wasn't born with this magical, ability. Like, I learned it. A lot of lessons I had to learn the hard way. I think it's when you finally get to a point where you learn how to recruit and develop leaders on your team is when you will actually scale, because you're not going to be able to do it all. So if, like in my business, where I best serve my business is doing what I'm doing now, being on the webinars, writing the content, being on stage. But if I'm doing that, I can't be CEO. I mean, or president of the company. I can't be CFO. I can't be the sales manager. I can't be the CMO. Like, I can still be involved, but in order for me to grow this org to where we have today, I needed to hire, develop leaders who could run divisions and can run a P&L. And I think, this really, maybe it has something to do with marketing, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But you're asking me, and I'm telling you, it's what's non-negotiable is you have to have a process, a willingness, because you're going to screw it up. So it's a willingness more than a capability, because you don't have capabilities until you screw it up, right? It's kind of that chicken and egg. But you got to have a willingness to go on and keep going until you find and can develop good leaders on your team to help that org actually scale.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about another risk factor we're not unpacking today, but I think it's relevant. That's owner dependencies.
Right.
I think we see a lot in the evaluation stage. An individual, if they leave and take a vacation for a week, the business, the enterprise feels the impact of their absence, right? And so our joke always is, can you take a month long or 2 month long sabbatical as the owner of this IT company And will the business still be around in 2 months if you leave for 2 months and truly unplug? And what I'm hearing you say is to scale, it can't just be a one-person shop. It has to be across the division. There has to be talent across the division, across the organization. So Robin, kind of digging in on one more question related to this growth, to this piece. What if there is an organization who's just flat? I mean, the industry grows between 5 to 10% a year, but let's just say they're kind of stuck in that 5 to 7%, or they're flat. They're not growing. They're flatlining. How do they break through? What advice would you give them?
Well, I think you have to try to identify the reason for the flat line, because I can't just give a universal answer and say, well, this is what they do, because what most people are trying to solve for are not the problem, they're trying to solve the symptom. And what I mean by that, so if your sales are not where they need to be, that's not the problem, that's the symptom. What's the problem? Well, the problem often is you have nobody dedicated to doing sales. Well, if you have nobody in your organization focused on an activity, it is not going to just automatically flourish. It's not going to happen. And so, again, if they're flat because maybe their strategy's wrong, maybe they do have something, maybe they have the wrong person in the role, maybe they don't have anybody in the role, maybe they're not putting sufficient investments into it. So I can't say universally, here's why they're flat. But I do think if you are flat, you have to have an honest conversation and say to yourself, first of all, do I have somebody responsible for making this go? And what is the goal, by the way? A lot of them don't even have goals. Like, is the goal to grow 5%, 10%? And why do we want that? And how are we going to get there? Because you need a clear goal. You need a plan of action, you need accountability, and you need real metrics and numbers. Because if you don't have those things, then you're not going to grow. So I think the problem is that is not not growth. That's the symptom of the problem, which is, it's one of those things. You don't have a plan, you don't have the person, you don't have the resources, or maybe you don't have any of that. So I think you've got to identify the real problem first, and then you've got to solve for that specific problem.
Really good. I'm going to click 6 times now to get to the final slide, because that's what I have to do in this current situation. Existing customer growth. Greg, how is this measured and talked about in the valuation process? And what are you seeing as you do, we do a couple hundred valuations a year. So are any trends you're seeing in the data related to this specific driver?
Yeah, so unlike the 3 previous factors we just talked about, this is the one factor that truly flows into the financial calculation of the valuation, and it truly is a makeup of this has a direct impact on your financial statements. The other 3 definitely have an impact, but it's more of like an indirect impact, and it's going to be hard to really measure each of those other underlying factors and their overall impact on growth. But when you're looking at existing customer growth, you can point to a number on a spreadsheet and say your customers have grown by X over the last year, or in our case, we actually look at the last 3 years to see, do you have this trend of actually going out and cross-selling and upselling and really marketing to your current customer base? Are you really bringing new ideas to them? Are you engaging with growing customers as well, where they're maybe incurring additional seats, or they're expanding their services with you? Or even quite frankly, are you retaining those customers for that 3-year duration, where you're able to actually see those service fees go up year over year by more than just the inflationary adjustment? So what we've been seeing in the data is companies that have lower than 10% growth from a top line standpoint in revenue typically have only about a 3% existing customer growth or lower across the board with their existing customer base. And it's because they're only really growing by the inflationary adjustments they're making on their customers. They're not doing cross-sell, upsell. They're not looking for expanding opportunities within their existing customer base. And so the sales and marketing is all external, and they're totally missing the internal component of it. Whereas companies we work with that hit that 20% growth or higher, you see 10, 15, or even 20% growth in some cases on the existing customer growth, because they're continuously, as part of their sales process, trying to sell to their existing customers, and not in a sales, commission breath sort of way, but really like, hey, I actually am now aware of you as a customer. I know you're and understand your needs. I believe this is a solution that can fit that need that you have. So it's really actually kind of doubling down on your identity and your strategy for how you're servicing your customers, but making sure you're focusing on those existing customers too, and not just the external market.
Yeah, the reality is cross-selling upsell should be a gold mine, right? For
Yes.
MSPs. And so, Robin, what do you see some of the mistakes that MSPs commit when it comes to really mining that existing customer base for growth?
Yeah, I think again, I think the mindset is once you get a customer, the end. You just service
Mhm.
that customer and that's it. And they don't view a customer as an asset to be
Yeah.
developed. And again, it goes back to the tech with helpers mindset, engineer just plugging away, doesn't their motivations, they don't want a boss. They're not thinking about enterprise value and growth versus someone who's an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, your mindset is investment. When I buy stocks, I'm buying an investment. And I expect that investment to grow and pay off, or I wouldn't invest in it. Getting a customer is an investment. It costs money. If you're doing it, unless you're just doing vulture marketing, but then you're just going to get whatever happens, right? But it costs money to get that customer. You're going to put time and effort and energy into retaining that customer. I don't want just a, I don't, so in other words, I don't do marketing and sales to get to make a sale, to make the revenue. I do that to get a customer. So I know what a customer is going to be worth to me over the lifetime. I know what additional things that they're going to want to buy. And it's always about making that asset more valuable because that is an easier game to play than is getting a new customer. So the other reason that you want to make every customer more value is customer acquisition costs are through the roof. I mean, the last time Paul Sissel was talking about from Service Leadership data is that the best in class MSPs are spending over $27,000 to get a new customer. And that's all in fully burdened sales and marketing costs. If I'm going to spend $27,000 to get a customer, I got to really make sure I can monetize that. I got to keep them. I got to get referrals. I got to grow and expand in that account. I've got to, retain them for 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years, right? And so when you have that mindset of an investment, then obviously you're going to invest in growing and retaining and expanding that customer. And again, it just comes down, I think a lot of them just they don't have a sales background, they don't have an investment mindset. They think that's all they'll pay. That guy won't buy this. I've already talked to them 3 years ago. I mentioned managed services. They said no. So in their mind, they're never going to buy them again. It's like they have all this dysfunction. And again, I say this, like they're not bad guys. They're not dumb. It's just they've not been exposed to this kind of thinking before. And that's a lot of that's what we do. I mean, we're like a therapy shop more than we're marketing, I think, really. I mean, because we got to get all the dysfunction out of their mindset before we can actually get anything done.
Yeah. So we got to wrap up here in a few minutes, but Robin, maybe a practical method you've seen work related to MSPs really expanding their clientele revenue opportunities.
Well, the thing I would say for the easiest place to find money is go back into your existing customer base and do proper account management.
Yeah.
Start by look at your customers and set and play this game. If that wasn't your customer and there was another incumbent MSP in there, what would you do to go in and evaluate their environment to point out what's missing, what's weak, where they're at risk, what's old, what's dated, where they're being underserved so that you could win that account over? And if you
Mm.
take that mindset going in, you pretend like you're disrupting yourself, you're replacing yourself,
Mhm.
right? And when you do that, you're actually being a real true consultant to your clients because they
Mhm.
like sales. This is how sales doesn't happen. You're not going to get a client that's going to call you on the phone and say, "Hey, Greg, Aaron, I got a big pile of money here. I don't know what to do with. You guys have anything that you could sell me?" I mean, that's not going to happen. So it's up to you not to sell people stuff they don't need. That's not what I'm saying. And I think that's a very bad idea. Go back to your existing customers, look at their cybersecurity and compliance areas. That's usually a grossly overlooked area. I
Mm.
was just talking to another MSP and well, a couple of them because we put together like a Windows end of life, Windows 11, Windows 10 kind of end of life campaign, and it's working like gangbusters. People are saying, "Yeah, my MSP is not talking to me about that." It's
Mm.
unbelievable. It's so bad. You only have to do a little bit of effort And go back. That's the easiest money. Go back to your existing customers, look at areas, compliance, cybersecurity are the two big, but just disrupt yourself and then check this out. While you're there, ask them for a referral. And don't just say, hey, can you give me a referral? You actually have to kind of like a talk track around it. But that's if you did that, think about this. If you went back to every customer and did proper account management, QBRs, budgeting, planning, and you asked clients for referral every time you met with them, you could literally double your MSP in a year. Because if every customer gave you one customer, you double. But nobody does it because they don't think about it. They don't know how to ask. They forget to ask. They feel awkward about it. They don't want to meet with their customers. They got all these reasons why they can't do it. I just gave you something as the simplest, easiest thing, but how many of you are actually going to execute it? And then we're right back to why most MSPs don't grow.
Yeah. Great advice. I love the comment about almost assuming that your customer is being courted by someone else. And when I talk about account management, I talk about it's important to be productively paranoid. So don't let the paranoia of losing the customer keep you unproductive, but be productive and say, okay, if this is the reality, what do I need to do to make sure that doesn't happen? And it's about being proactive. Such great advice. Greg and Robin, thank you so much. I want to get here to the final couple slides. And again, man, it's been hard to get these slides to advance. It's 10 clicks, just so you know. Robin, if people want to know more about what you guys do, here's a slide that allows them to scan a QR code. Give us an overview of how you help MSPs and IT companies tackle some of these challenges.
Yeah, so again, my history goes back to when I worked for a couple of different marketing firms. And I love marketing. I love sales and marketing. I've always been fascinated by it, interested in it. That is like a hobby for me. Like I love great marketing campaigns. When I see them, I love to like talk about and think of it. It's like a hobby. So I've always loved sales and marketing. And so back to when in my DNA, but when I work for most agencies, most marketing agencies are not interested in helping you grow your business. They're interested in selling you the media or the services that they provide, right? And you think when you hire them, they have similar motivation. They're here to help you get more customers. But if you go to a Facebook expert who does Facebook ads and you say, hey, I want to grow my business, can you help me? They're going to say, yeah, sure, we can totally run Facebook ads. They're not going to look at you and say, you know what, maybe you should be doing QBRs. Maybe you're not packaged and priced properly. We need to look at that first. Because if your packaging and your pricing is off, you have terrible contracts, you have no sales process, you're underpriced. And so if we add more customers to your model right now at the price point you have, I'm going to tank you. Like, maybe we shouldn't run Facebook ads. Maybe we should fix that first. See, no, I don't know of any marketing firm, SEO firm, web design company that's going to have that conversation with you. So when I started my business from the standpoint of I'm not here to sell you on any kind of media. And yes, we do sell SEO. We sell platinum websites, digital marketing services, all the things. But that's not what customers come to me when they want to know, get a plan, a step-by-step plan and proven framework for going to market that is comprehensive so you actually get the result. That's that ACE framework. Because if you just go generate leads by any means and you're not strategic about it, it's just going to waste your time and money. And if you can't convert the leads, there's no point. You're just going to get leads and they're not going to convert. Or worst case, the marketing works, you convert some to customers, but your packaging and pricing is off. We're going to implode your business. So that's our ACE framework. So what MSPs used to come to me for is just the marketing piece. And then we started doing sales training about 10 years ago because we realized if we don't teach them what to do with the leads once they get them, they're like, this was a waste of money. So, and then we started to say, you know what we need to do? We need to teach these guys how to properly package and price their services and do the QBRs and do proper account management. Because if we don't teach them that, they're going to get customers and they're not going to monetize them. So people come to us. We're still primarily known for marketing, but that is what our programs do. If you go to the site, there is just a ton of free resources. There are ultimate guide to MSP marketing. There's things in there like, how do you know how much to spend on marketing? There's my ultimate guide, which is a smattering of ideas. There's videos of clients that explaining what they did in marketing to grow their MSP. And that's all there that you can get for free.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Robin. And for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with what we do at IT Valuations, we, as mentioned earlier, do a couple hundred valuations a year, looking at those 24 company-specific risk factors. Also, we'll do about 15 transactions a year. I've closed really 4 in the last week, so it's been a big week at ITV. 60% of the time, we're typically representing a seller, someone who's looking to potentially exit or maybe join a platform. About 40% of the time, we have buyers that we're representing as well. Do a couple mergers a year, and then Greg is a managing partner for IT Tax Advisors, which is really an opportunity for IT owners to think through not just getting their taxes filed every year. Greg, I'll let you speak for about a minute about that piece of our business.
Yeah, really trying to look at taxes through a different lens of, does your tax profile fit your goals and objectives for what you want to do personally, as well as what you want to do with your business? And so too many times you set up your S Corp at 30 years ago, and that's what you've been for all 30 years. And then you just filed the annual tax return because it's the necessary evil, but you haven't actually, reviewed that tax plan to say, how can I optimize my circumstances? How can I potentially change my structure if necessary to realize the, personal wealth target or business valuation target that I want to reach. So it's really just trying to bring a different lens to the tax compliance necessary evil to really make it more consultative and advisory service to latch on to the valuation goals that you're trying to seek out.
Yeah, if you'd like to request a vast demo, we can walk you through what that looks like, how we walk through clients through their valuations on a quarterly basis. You can scan the QR code. Greg can also provide some additional information about IT Tax Advisors if that's what you're interested in learning more about. Last but not least, we asked a trivia question about Robin, and this is the only webinar I've done in 18 months where I have not actually known the answer to the trivia question. So the next slide typically reveals the answer, but she wouldn't even tell me before we started. So I'm on pins and needles. Robin, most memorable celebrity interview you did was what? Was who and why?
Yeah, I'm still sitting here trying to decide because, Sammy the Bull Gravano was probably one of the most nerve-wracking ones I did because we didn't tell everybody. We just promoted him as Mr. X, so people had no idea. Even my
Oh,
staff
wow.
had no idea he was going to be showing up. He had heavy security around him. I didn't know how the interview was going to land. I didn't know what he was going to talk about. And so that's on the list. And Buzz Aldrin was an icon. I got goosebumps when he was on stage, and he spent time with my daughter and myself. My Emily was still a baby at the time, and he was, I mean, just to have a legend like that on your stage and to be able to spend time with someone like that is amazing. And Mike Rowe, one of the best brand marketers I know. I had dinner with him, and it was supposed to, well, I actually started out, it was supposed to be a quick meet and greet before before he spoke. And it turned into a 3.5 hour dinner that we had, learned just a ton of stuff. And Jordan Peterson was somebody that I've always wanted because Jordan actually brought me back to my faith in God. I was raised in a religious cult, and I was church hurt, I guess, as you say, because God's perfect, but the church and the people on earth are not, including myself. So Jordan was somebody that brought me back to my faith. But I think from the most memorable one, I have to go with the Shark Tank panel because being able to get Damon John and Robert Herjavec and Kevin O'Leary, and we had Fred Vicola, they sponsored, so he was the fourth shark. The reason that was, I think, most memorable is being able to pull that off is no simple, easy thing. I know all these guys. I know Robert, Damon, Kevin. I know those guys fairly well. They know me. I've had them speak at my stage. So to get them all together and have MSPs do a real Shark Tank, not this bullshit, oh, we'll call it Shark Tank and we'll have some fake judges up there, but to have the real Shark Tank panel there. And I think the reason it was so memorable to me is because what we had is 5 of our customers present to the sharks their business plan, their marketing plan as part of a contest we do every year called the Better Your Best. And it showcases and gives credit to our members who are achieving phenomenal results. In fact, that URL that we gave earlier, you'll see some of those presentations. And for me, watching those members stand in front of the sharks and deliver that, and it was just like this surreal moment. I think that the IT industry has never seen anything like that. And I mean, that's what we do. We bring these experiences. There's a cool factor to it, of course, but when our members get to hang out with somebody and talk to somebody like a Buzz Aldrin or a Mike Rowe or the sharks at Shark Tank, even Sammy the Bull. I mean, these are experiences that whether you like Sammy or however you feel about him, there's something to be learned from everybody, and bringing that unique experience. So I think I have to go with the Shark Tank panel as my most memorable.
And that means Heartland wins. So Heartland, I'll be in touch with the Amazon gift card. Robin, Greg, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it. For those of you who joined us, thank you for your time as well. And we'll see you in just a couple weeks for our next webinar. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye now.